This is the panel that many of you have been waiting for, myself included. An entire panel dedicated to the women warriors who go out every single day in their own way and fight for wildlife and environmental issues. I should not say fight. They promote healing and compassion and coexistence. Please enjoy, and I'll see you in a couple of hours.
I saw that on Facebook. Tired of it?
Hello, everybody. Yay. Look at all those faces.
Hello.
I'm so honored to see all of you, and obviously I'm big fans of all of you as well. So thank you for being a part of Sedona Wolf Week. We really appreciate you having here. I'm going to let Amaroq take it from here because I know the agenda is full and there's lots to talk about. Thanks so much.
There sure is.
So, hi everybody. Today I am joined by 7 wild women, and they are Casey York from Trap Free, Montana, Karin Vardaman of Working Circle, Lain Kahlstrom of Animal Wellness Action, Sandy Bahr of Sierra Club, Talasi Brooks of Western Watersheds Project, Quinn Reed of Center for Biological Diversity, Kerry David, founder of Over and Above Africa, and me, Amaroq Weiss from the Center for Biological Diversity, and I'm the 8th member of this panel. 7 or 8, including me, amazing wildlife warriors who are going to give you personal insights about their work, the challenges they face as activists, as women of color, what inspires them, who has mentored them, and the pain and the wonder and the glory of their service on behalf of wildlife. So are we ready? Let's start. Karin Vardaman, please introduce yourself and your organization.
Thank you, Amaroq. First of all, I just want to say it's such an honor to be here, and I'm humbled to be surrounded by so many amazing women. Wow. So thank you for inviting me. My name is Karin Vardaman, and I am with the Working Circle, which is a program of defenders of wildlife now. It was started back in 2015, but has evolved and grown from California to multiple states. So just excited to be here and share with you all today.
So Karin, while you're describing to us exactly what it is that you do, I'm wondering if you can kind of weave into there maybe some particularly rewarding moment that has really stood out for you, and tell us what that is and why it was special for you in the context of explaining to us exactly what it is you do.
I'd love to. Thank you. Well, the Working Circle premise or the idea was founded on the desire to bring multiple people together from different values and perspectives surrounding the challenges of coexistence, wolf livestock and shared landscapes. And so basically it's a kind of a 3-legged stool approach, if you will. We look at strategies, long-term strategies that help lower the risk of predation in cattle through comprehensive herd and land management strategies that is led and managed by the livestock community. So they're part of the solution and the stewards for wolves, believe it or not, as well as the helping producers increase their stewardship on the land through ranch resiliency efforts and regenerative agriculture. So it's a very comprehensive type of ecological and sociological approach to help neutralize some of the polarizing conflicts surrounding sustainable ag and wolf advocacy. And then the other part is that social side, again, trying to bring people around that circle, if you will, and sharing of ideas and thoughts and understanding and trying to move forward together. And I think for me, that's where the inspiration has really come from. You know, because I certainly never expected, as somebody who just love wolves and enjoy working with wolves and advocating for them, the people side of this. But that's ended up being one of the most rewarding parts. You know, that moment when, you know, at a workshop, for example, which the same producer may be resenting your very presence and maybe even say a few choice words, but at the end they give you that hug because they understand or they want to work together. or the moment when your rancher partner, you know, confesses that a year prior, if they saw a wolf around their cattle, they may have tried the SSS. But because of that relationship, that friendship, they would never consider that. Or the moment when your rancher range steward says, I was so excited to hear a howl. Really? You were excited to hear a howl? Or really that connecting of people to people, those aha moments when people understand each other and recognize that, you know, gosh, we actually are on the same community. We may be of different communities, but we're all part of the same community. And I think those are those moments of hope and inspiration and knowing that we can make this work for everybody, you know? So
that sounds like grateful probably every single day, every single interaction. So
it is.
And so you've grown maybe to realize that these relationships are going to happen, and you've maybe gotten some expectations that hopefully this will happen. But I'll bet there's been some times when something very unexpected has happened. And I'm wondering if that's the case. And if so, maybe you could talk about what that was and how did you handle that? How did that turn out in the end?
Well, you know, there are, I think, unexpected, you're right, every day you have those unexpecteds, you know, especially when, you know, we try to stay in what we call that radical middle space, you know, a lot of roller coasters in that. But what I found, I think, again, that those unexpected moments ends up being through those human connections. You know, again, when I first got into this, you know, I was just, it was all about the animals, you know, and Amaroq, you were the one that really inspired me. I don't know if you remember, but, you know, I was a volunteer at Cal Wolf Center and you gave this amazing talk. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to do what Amaroq does. And, you know, going to the rallies and hearings and participating on all these things. But I think through my experience on the stakeholder working group in California, listening, sitting across the table from producers, listening to their stories, and then having the opportunity when they took a risk on me to invite me into their homes and let me get a peek of their world, and just feeling like, in a way, a veil was lifted in understanding how much it's not really a wolf or a cow problem. It's a people issue, and the need to go there. And it was shocking, but I actually fell in love with this community and these ranchers and their families, and recognizing that they do, for the most part, want to do the right thing for the right reasons. And then suddenly I found myself in a whole different world. And I certainly never expected to know so much about ranch operations as a wolf advocate. But, you know, I guess coming at this from a different angle was one of the biggest unexpecteds for me. But pleasantly rewarding in so many ways when you can see how people can come together in common goals, and seeing how it does help the wolves, and how in many ways some of these, you know, ranchers are key to forwarding wolf recovery. So I guess that was unexpected, as I'm not really a people person by nature, but I certainly have become one, and it's been an enjoyable part of my journey.
So some people that are doing activist work also have experiences that aren't just unexpected, but sometimes dangerous, sometimes threatening. I have a colleague who did work in a northern Rocky state, who at one point was told by the sheriffs in several counties that she should not drive through their counties because they could not guarantee her safety. And so she would have to drive around multiple counties to get to where she needed to go. I can remember one time I was up in a high mountain grazing area with a rancher in California who brought me up there to see his operation. And we'd stopped first to get some beers, and we both got Red Wolf beer, which is funny. We both like the Red Wolf. And we're up there drinking our beers, just a few, not tipsy, so we could ride the horses back down. And he said, you know, my rancher buddies knew I was going to be up there with you today. And they said, while you're up there, why don't you just push the wolf lady off the mountain? And he and I laughed, and I didn't feel a bit threatened from him. And he thought his friends were silly. But, you know, when I told that story to people later, they thought, oh, that's so frightening. And I thought, well, There are other people that go through way more frightening things than that. That was a moment, but so what about you? Have you ever had moments where you felt threatened or in danger?
Yeah, there have been. And part of it is, I think, more my worry than maybe reality. But there's been some workshops, where the folks that weren't excited about us being there showed up with guns, showed them. I've had people get in my face and threaten. I actually had someone pretend to be a, person who wanted to do a podcast interview, pretended that they're all excited about the work, and turned out they just wanted an opportunity to, I don't know what that opportunity was, but when we did a little research, they were a hardcore anti-wolf person. And in field work, my colleague Jen and I, two gals, sometimes we're in really remote areas. And we've been out there, and there have been hunters that have watched us with their binoculars, followed us, and I've felt nervous in my tent. But I really think when I thought about, these things, I really think the greatest danger has actually come from within myself, meaning, it is such a roller coaster in this work, right? There's so many victories, that feeling, when something goes well, it's so high, so rewarding, and you have that hope for wolves in the future. Then you get those devastating setbacks, a poaching event, for example, or a lethal order that, is being implemented. Or even now with the delisting, and you start to question, is it worth it? Why am I fighting so hard? Maybe I should just quit. Maybe it's not really making a difference. And you just, you think maybe it'd be easier to have another job. And does it really matter if you're doing this long term? And, again, as I mentioned, being in this radical middle space, sometimes it's a tough area to be in because I'm part of two communities, wolf advocates as well as the ranching, but you're not really completely part of one. And I often find that sometimes I'm beat up from both. I'm either too much of a wolf lover if you're a rancher, I'm too much a rancher lover on the other side. And it's hard. So I start to question, right? Why? and then you remember those victories, right? Or then you're talking to folks like you, all of you that are so inspirational. And then you think about, well, what if everybody quit? What if you guys weren't doing what you were doing? And as a good friend of mine said to me once, she's like, well, the alternative is just not acceptable. If everybody just quit, nobody said it was going to be easy. And it does take a village on the legal side, the policy side, the COEX side, the people side, advocacy side, all of these things. And so, you have to believe in that vision. And it's those things that keep that danger within at bay and gives me hope that we can create that lasting environment for wolves long term. So I think the greatest danger is those doubts and not letting them take over and keeping moving forward, even when you think like 2020 is all coming to an end. So
I couldn't agree with you more. You said that so beautifully. And I'm going to leave things there with you for now. People can ask you some questions towards the end, but right now we're going to move on. And so please, Casey York, would you please introduce yourself and your organization and tell us what you do?
All right. So I'm Casey York, and I'm the founder and president of Trap Free Montana and Trap Free Montana Public Lands, based out of the Bitterroots in Montana. Formed, both of them actually initiated with a ballot, began with a ballot initiative in 2013. And after that, went ahead and didn't know where we were going to go from there. We formed late. Another organization didn't like what the Secretary of State did to the ballot language for trap-free public lands. And so they decided not to go forward. And some of us felt we had to, that the trappers weren't going to wait. And so neither could we. So we consulted with some experts, but we only wound up with like 5.5 months to get signatures. I'm proud to say we got more signatures as a all volunteer. Probably 1% were paid signature gatherers, but we were basically all volunteer. And we got more signatures in Montana that year as a citizen-driven initiative than any other ballot attempt. So much the League of Women Voters called on us. And what was interesting is I was a part of it in 2009, the first attempt in Montana to get trap-free public lands. And people didn't know trapping still went on. They were, trapping? What are you talking about? The other interesting point was how many people made it about wolves. So in 2009, we were still in the whole delisting thing in Montana, or maybe it had already, they'd been delisted and they were looking, I don't recall. But we had to stay away from that and keep talking. This is about trapping on public lands. By 2013, when we tried, people were running across the road to sign. They knew they didn't like trapping. They didn't like trapping on public lands for whatever reasons. And it was so inspiring. Not to be, of course, we had those that yelled at us and, that wrote trapper all over the petition, or which is totally illegal. But there were so many more that were just really on board. So that was wonderful. And like I said, the shortage of time was our biggest detriment. From there, we said, okay, we're not quitting, that's for sure. And our attorney recommended, when we just tried to decide what should we do next, he said, why not have two organizations? Have your 501c4, Trap Free Montana Public Lands, so we can continue the political aspect of it, and Trap Free Montana, which is the educational component. That's what, the Trap Free Montana Public Land, just to elaborate a little further, works on, like I said, trapping reform. There's so many wrongs, in particular in Montana. It's a very, very few and lax trapping regulations. So there's many ways to attack that. And then Trap Free Montana works on the educational component and increasing public awareness. We have billboards around the state of Montana. Actually, Plan B is a sponsor of one of them. And it's the End of the Suffering billboard with a trapped and dying wolf on it. And our mission with Trap Free Montana is for both of them, is respectful coexistence and the use of non-lethal methods to promote that. When people say, well, we might not like recreational trapping, but trapping is necessary for damage control, property protection, etc. Well, it's not. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's what we promote as well.
That's an incredible story. And for anyone who's wondering how grassroots organizations literally start from a blade of grass, there is Casey, the blade of grass, who punches through the soil and gathers up all the other seedlings and says, we are growing. And that's a really touching story, Casey. I've never heard you tell that story before.
Oh, thank you.
That is truly inspiring. So what inspires you? This is tough work. This is tragedy and life and death, and it's got to be something that inspires you, that keeps you going through that.
Yes. And to be honest, it isn't just one thing. I think it's the core of my being. It's how I grew up. And if I may, I'll touch on that briefly. I'll try to be brief. I have no conception of time, so just feel free to cut me off. But my mother grew up in the Depression, and she grew up in the city in New York, and she would get the drowned kittens out of the garbage cans and try to save them with the milk that was donated to her family. She was an unwanted child. She was a surprise pregnancy, and Dad took off. So this mother had two little kids, a little boy and my mother, and she was very poor. So her heart not only went out to the animals, but to other victims. And she carried that through and passed that on to me, to really reach out to the underdog, to the kid that doesn't have a friend, to the starving dog. And I grew up, I was surrounded by animals. My mother never met a dog she didn't like. Anybody who couldn't keep a pet, they came to live with us. And some people talk about those that have a green thumb. My mother had, I don't know if you want to call it a furry thumb or brown thumb. She could save the animals that veterinarians would say, oh, you have to let it go. No, she wasn't going to let it go. And so I was indoctrinated to that from an early age. I was only 5 years old, and we had moved back from Europe, where I didn't have any kids to play with, but I had my German Shepherd, who thought I was his pup. So he was always with me. And I played, with the lion statues, the animal, my dog. We moved back to Florida, and there were cute little ducklings all around. It was Easter time. I was only 5 years old, and my mother said, do you know they take them? I was way too young for her to probably tell me this, but she said, and they stuff them. And you could buy them back then as little stuffed ducklings. And I was horrified. And I think in retrospect, that was my indoctrination to these animals need help. They need someone to say that's not okay. And anybody, and I have some lifelong friends, know I was out there always getting the ducklings back together and rescuing them. And when they were poisoning the canals, I rode my bike down to City Hall to say, you got to stop poisoning the canals, you're killing the ducks. So it was how I grew up. And that's what inspires me. My father joined the Navy in the Depression when he was only 14. He lied. And he became the youngest chief petty officer in the history of the Navy. He went into bomb disposal. He was a fighter. So the combination of compassion and being strong, independent, like my mother, she became a single parent, and that fighter in my genes. My stepfather in the Depression was a rancher, a hunter, and a trapper. So the combination of all of them brought forth my knowledge and my passion towards animals. And I really feel the older I get, I don't regret as much of what I've done as what I haven't done. So I'm my own worst critic, and I often feel like it's not enough, but I know I'm trying. And as long as we can say we're trying, that keeps it going. All of you, what just happened in Montana is disastrous. For those that don't know, we now have a trapper for governor. He is a lifelong member of the Montana Trappers Association, and he gives $10,000 at least once, maybe annually, to that association. And what is going to happen in Montana, I don't think people realize. He won by a bit over 50%, but the fact that he won, and the people we're going to lose, the wildlife commissioners that are going to be appointed, the people that in FWP that are probably going to be replaced, it's going to look like, I can't imagine it ever being as bad. And this happened right before this, and I was like, how do I get on here and motivate women and pretend I'm strong? Well, I am strong, but I had to put my big girl panties on and look at all of you and know we still are the majority. We're the majority.
That is absolutely true. We are still the majority. Every survey across the nation lets us know that we are getting away from this view of dominance over animals and towards a feeling of commensalism. We are part of them, they are part of us. It's just getting those policies translated from how we feel about them into policy. And that is the work that all of us do. Our time is up for right now, but in question and answer later, I'm going to ask you about the white buffalo, because I want you to talk about that. But I just think that what you just said to us here should let everyone in the audience know that whatever your background is really important in bringing you to this same place of wanting to fight for animals. It's not something that you necessarily have to learn. A lot of it is something that was just right here to begin with from the start, and who your village was as you grew up. So thank you, Casey. And with that, now Lain Kahlstrom, would you please introduce yourself and your organization?
Great. Yes, thank you, Amaroq. My name is Lain Kahlstrom, and I work with Animal Wellness Action. Animal Wellness Action is a newer organization. It's about 2.5 years old, and we are a 501c4 because we focus on legislative and regulatory improvements and law enforcement. So our main goal is influencing legislatures, getting laws and rules in place. So we do an awful lot of lobbying. My focus as the Director of State Affairs is on working on state and local level legislation and regulation and law enforcement. So I've worked on a number of wildlife issues. Animal Wellness Action does have the mission helping animals helps us all. And as an organization, we work on all animal issues. But for me personally, I have a real soft spot for wildlife, dealing with wildlife issues. I've worked on wildlife for a very long time, since the time I was a teenager, and really the only activist women I knew that I looked up to tremendously were Jane Goodall and Ingrid Newkirk of PETA. So they were my very earliest role models of women who were working to protect animals, and I followed their work closely. And as a result, I've been working on wildlife issues, animal issues overall for several decades now. Most recently, I've been working, these last few years, a lot on wildlife killing contests in a lot of the states. I worked closely with Betsy Klein, who of course is Plan B for wolves, and a number of others here in Arizona to work on that here, and then also in Washington State. And then as a rule, our organization works on a lot of federal level legislation as well. So we work on pushing legislation for the Bahr Protection Act, trying to get that to be enacted, shark finning bills, working on lead ammo at the federal level. So there are a lot of wildlife issues that Animal Wellness Action is focused on, but I tend to be most drawn to the ones that are dealing with specific issues around wildlife killing contests and wolves. Been working a little bit with a few folks in Washington State on the wolf issue there, and have been very pleased to see some measure of progress in what's going on in the state of Washington as it regards to wolves. But of course, I think like everybody on this panel was horrified November 3rd with that wolf delisting. We saw that, we knew that was a slow rolling train wreck that was coming our way, but it's still heartbreaking to see that break the wrong way for us. Yes. As you said, we were all expecting it, but that doesn't mean it isn't still completely distressing to see it happening all over again. So you work on a lot of campaigns. What are the factors that you find are most important when you're working on campaigns? It's interesting being a newer group. There are a lot of people haven't heard of Animal Wellness Action. Even though I, as an individual, have been working with other organizations for literally decades, I've volunteered with groups like PETA, HSUS, PAWS, a number of local groups as well, rescues. What I found is that it's really the personal relationships that you build. It's the people that you can call on, like Casey and Betsy and you, Amaroq, the people that I know personally that have been such a help in, providing the right resources and ideas for campaigns when we get stuck. And so for me, one of the keys has been really relying on my network of like-minded warriors, particularly women wildlife warriors, who come up with these ideas that I hadn't thought of and figured out a way to move forward when campaigns get stuck. So for me, I think the thing, as I've gotten older and I've worked on more and more campaigns, what's become paramount to me are my fellow tribes people who are working on these issues with me, and being able to put together a small tiger team that's willing to work day and night to see any given campaign through. It's very easy for things to get tough. We've all worked on campaigns that have not gone the way we wanted, or we didn't get the win that we wanted. But what I found most helpful is just having a few small key team members who will work the problems with you and get very creative about how to push forward through obstacles that would stop 99% of the people. And that's where I really credit some of the brains on this call directly for just having the smarts to push through some obstacles.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. There are people I know, and you're one of them, and everybody else here on this panel is one of them, that I could probably send a message to at 1 o'clock in the morning and I would get an answer back. There will be somebody else up tenaciously pounding away on something that just has to be handled right now. And so we get to work in such a rarefied community of people. It's really an honor. It's an honor. Let's talk about some of the challenging moments you've had with opposition and how you've dealt with them, how you've dealt with that situation.
Yeah, well, like Karin, I've certainly run across incidents where I've had opposition yelling very closely at me, taking pictures of me and my car, just trying to do standard intimidation practices. But I think Karin spoke about this so well, and I think a lot of that's true for me as well, that I've just determined that a lot of that risk and a lot of those scare tactics and intimidation, those are things that are not necessarily within my control. If somebody is going to be insane, that's not necessarily something I can do anything about. But what I can monitor is my own reaction to intimidation tactics. And what's helped me is just to remain resolved that I'm working my issues, I'm working the problems I'm working on, and what they do or don't do is going to be on them. But there's very little that's going to get in my way. I've gotten more and more attached to my own resolve as I go as a result of it.
That's a good thing. What's been the biggest surprise in your learning to be a wildlife activist? What's happened? What have you learned? What has either gone through your bloodstream or what has actually happened on the ground that was just a big surprise for you?
I have to say, Amaroq, I think it's that there are wins, because so much of my life as an early activist, when I was not terribly effective, most of the time you come up with a loss. But what's been the biggest surprise is by partnering with really strong and effective advocates, how many wins you can get. And right now, for instance, we've got a change in administration coming up, whether people like to admit it or not. And already our team is at work trying to figure out with the Biden transition team, what are the priorities we want this transition team to focus on, particularly for wildlife? What do we want the Department of Interior to be doing? And we've already come up with a list, our top 10 list, that we want them to address immediately with the Department of Interior. So it's, and it's things that you all know, like let's get the, try and get a push for a voluntary remand of that rule that just went through last week to get that delisting of wolves, getting the DOI to push for a voluntary remand of that, getting the National Park Service to return some of the rules that they put in place. There was a rule that was put in 2015 to restrict predator killing on natural preserves, and that was just nullified, I think, this past May. But that's another one that we think should be reversed. It can be reversed, and we want the Biden transition team focused on that. The issues around predator killing on national wildlife refuges in Alaska, there had been some checks in place for that. And those, of course, have been nullified during the course of this administration. So it's things like that. It's working with people who are really sharp and effective and strategic about thinking through, given all of the things that are going on now, what are our opportunities to make a change? And I think one of the other big surprises about it is how many really smart advocates there are out there who will have 10 issues like this just simmering on the back burner. And yet we know these are all issues that have to get solved for, but when there becomes an opportunity that's clear to focus on one of them, let's say, for instance, this issue with mink fur farms. None of us want mink fur farms in our country, and and this is something that the Department of Agriculture allows. It's perfectly legal to have fur farms for mink. But with COVID, we've seen recently what's happened in the news with this idea that the mink themselves may be mutating and spreading this virus. So that rises to the top of our list of, perhaps this is something the Biden transition team can focus on as well with the Department of Agriculture, is initiating a buyout of all of these mink fur farms in this country, the way they have been in Europe. They're already focused on shutting down mink fur farms in Europe. So it's things like that I find the most surprising and rewarding about this work, is working with other really smart activists who help come up with amazing strategies and resolve to see them all through, given whatever circumstances allow for a particular campaign to come to the surface and get attention.
Yeah, you just laid out a whole host of issues there. We're going to have to move on, but I want to just make a note, because you talked about we're surprised when there are wins because they're so far and few between. I just want everyone to think about the fact that this ballot initiative to get wolves reintroduced to Colorado, which just passed, is really one of the first instances I can think of, and it may be the only instance, of a truly proactive action. That it wasn't a fighting back. It wasn't trying to kill a bad wolf bill. It wasn't trying to make sure a legislator didn't swap off something that normally they wouldn't have agreed to, but they're going to do it to get their colleague to vote for something they want. It wasn't any of this defensive stuff. This was a truly proactive measure, and it passed. And I'd like to think that this is the beginning. This is the beginning of what we're going to be capable of doing state by state by state. So thank you for working on so many issues. And now we're going to move on to our next panelist, and that is Sandy Bahr. You are up next, and so please introduce yourself and your organization.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be part of this wonderful and amazing panel of women wildlife warriors. I'm really honored to be part of this. Yes, as was noted, I'm Sandy Bahr. I'm with Sierra Club's Grand Canyon chapter, and that's the Arizona chapter. And I've enjoyed this position with the Grand Canyon chapter for the last 22 years. Prior to working for Sierra Club, I was a volunteer with the organization, and I've also done work with the Arizona Audubon Council as a lobbyist and a brief stint with a local land trust. I have to say that I did not have a direct path to doing this work. I started out in engineering and surveying because when I went to college, I really just wanted to get a job when I got out so I could pay my student loans. And so I didn't even think about, oh, you could do this kind of work. But my background, growing up in rural Michigan, having an opportunity to roam about the woods, walk to the river, ride bike to a lake, all of that, I think, helped me have a real strong connection with nature. And then moving to Arizona really deepened my appreciation for the need to have advocates for people, for wildlife, for lands, for really everything that we care about. I fell in love with the Sonoran Desert and all that has adapted to living here with limited water and extreme temperatures. And so this has been my home for most of my life. Sierra Club overall, it's a national organization with a very broad mission. Our mission is to explore, enjoy, and protect the wild places of the earth. And that means in addition to the wildlife work, we advocate for clean energy and actions to address the climate crisis, work on the borderlands, trying to stop the significant human rights violations, as well as the horrible border wall that is affecting wildlife. I did want to mention something that Sierra Club hasn't always done well, is centering our work on principles of equity, justice, and inclusion. But that is a very big priority for us, and we are recognizing the history, owning the mistakes, and working to create a culture of inclusion. One of the big reasons I was attracted to getting involved with Sierra Club, first as a volunteer and then working here, is it provides an opportunity to use multiple tools to accomplish our goals. I do lobbying, we do outings and hikes and service projects and electoral work, trying to get some better people elected to office, litigation, grassroots actions. So it was a place as a volunteer where I could learn and grow and develop leadership skills, and I think it still is. I'll just say before stopping, one of the earliest efforts I was involved with Sierra Club was advocating for reintroduction of the Mexican gray wolf. When I moved to Arizona, there were no Mexican gray wolves in the wild anyplace. And through significant effort, collaboration among many groups, litigation, advocacy, we were able to see those animals reintroduced. And it was exciting to me to, know by calling people and knocking on doors and being at various events, tabling, that 300 people would show up and say, we want wolves in Arizona. And so that was kind of an early inspiration. All of the efforts haven't been like that, but and we know there are still many challenges, but I think that that work really helped me connect with a lot of people and be inspired to continue doing this work.
A couple of notes when you said that working for Sierra Club really gave you the opportunity to use a lot of tools to accomplish your goals. I thought, there's her engineering background coming into play. And here she thought maybe that didn't have anything to do with her environmental work. But look at this. All of the things that we each individually bring to the table does inform our work, does help our work. And you also commented, as have the previous speakers, about this necessity of this people network. A lot of people get into wildlife work thinking, I'm just going to work on the animals. It's not just about the animals. It is about other people that are sharing that place with the animals that you're also working with as well. So it's fun to hear this theme keep coming up. I'm interested to know, Sandy, what are the aspects of your work that you think could have made the most positive impact for wildlife?
Yeah, always a tough question, but a good one. I think one of the aspects that has made the greatest difference is the people work, is encouraging people to get involved, helping people learn how to get involved, and really, I guess, demonstrating that you don't have to be some kind of expert. You don't have to know everything about everything to do the work, and really just caring and having a passion for it is what's needed. One of the stories that I always tell when I'm talking to people about, getting involved with something, including with wildlife, is that when I was in school, I had to take a public speaking class for my program, and I would sign up for it and then drop it when the first speech was due. And I did that 3 times before I finally finished the class. And it really was only after I learned about how important it was to be talking about things you really care about, that I was able to speak up and you know, just reminding people that, yeah, we all get nervous. We're all human, and you know, just if you care about this, you can do it. So I think helping to mentor and engage people is probably where I've had the greatest difference. I feel like that wolf work, working in collaboration early on, has made an impact. Watchdogging the Arizona Game and Fish Commission, even when they've been horrible. I think that has made a difference. We have been able to get some changes. Some years ago, the urban wildlife program was basically anytime a mountain lion was spotted, they would shoot it or capture it or do something to euthanize. And through a collaborative effort, we were able to get Arizona Game and Fish to change that program. And I suppose I have to say that a lot of my work has been focused on stopping bad things, but you have to stop the bad things to make room for the good things. And so I always think about it that way, like, okay, we've stopped this, we'll keep at it for moving this along. And I suppose finally I should say that I think habitat protection and the climate work is really important for wildlife too. It's one of the things our Arizona Game and Fish Department and Commission seem to forget, that you're not going to have healthy wildlife populations if you don't protect the habitat. And we are going to lose a lot of species if we don't address climate change. So.
We're going to be moving on soon, but I wanted to make a special note to thank you for your comments on environmental groups needing to really examine diversity, equity, and inclusion as a fundamental principle of our work. Because when we think about who is out here doing this work and how exclusionary our fields have been for so many reasons, starting from the fact that people of color who live in poverty are not able to afford camping equipment. And if you don't get to go out camping, how do you develop some of the appreciation that we have had the good fortune, that I have had the good fortune to do? So I think it's really fundamentally important as we examine all of these issues for wildlife. These are social justice and environmental justice issues as well. And so I thank you so much for raising that in your comments. And with that, we're going to move on. And so, Kerry David, would you please introduce yourself and tell us all about your organization? Thank you, Sam. Oh, we can't hear you, Kerry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I've got a new puppy and she's just uncontrollable. So she's laughing, crying, chewing, squeaking. So I was trying to be respectful. I just want to say thank you so much for having me on this panel with you incredible ladies, because while wolves have not been my focal point, you know, in my own journey, so much of what you've all been saying and sharing relates to the work that I do, which is wildlife that's in danger of becoming extinct. So I'm a filmmaker, that's my profession, but I am primarily someone who has always advocated for animals. And again, like most of you, I prefer animals to people, but that hasn't changed for me, I still do. I think that what has really, so I started a foundation called Over and Above Africa. And I did it because I was invited to a fundraiser in downtown Los Angeles, and that's where I learned just how dire it was for wildlife in Africa that's being trafficked and poached commercially. And I was devastated. I mean, truly traumatized. And I went home that night thinking, you know, if I really am someone who loves wildlife, I can no longer look away and say, I don't know about that, or pretend it's not happening on my front door and therefore that's enough for me. And So I decided to do something. So my film, Breaking Their Silence, Women on the Front Line of the Poaching War, very much goes hand in hand with my work as the founder and CEO of Over and Above Africa. I've been able to sort of utilize both to share the message. And what we specialize in, originally, we're quite a young company, Over and Above Africa, and this is our 4th year. And we originally specialized in triaging. So we would find small units on the ground who were doing really necessary work. Their work was effective, but they were underfunded or had no funding at all. While I was researching, I went to Africa, started meeting with the people on the ground to talk about what the problems were so that we could perhaps come back here and then decide how we could help in a meaningful way. It dawned on me that I was just meeting men, and they were amazing men, like phenomenal men. And the work that they were doing is it's important, it's necessary, and it's effective. But I also knew that there's going to be women somewhere doing phenomenal work, and I wanted to find them, and maybe I could do something that could amplify their voices. But at the time, I didn't know what that would be. And sure enough, I spoke to one woman, and much like we do as women, one woman said, oh, you need to meet this woman, and you need to meet that woman. And before I knew it, there was just a sea of women who seemed to be doing phenomenal work. And I wanted to, like I say, I wanted to amplify their message. So that's how I had the idea for Breaking Their Silence. And I went to Africa, and it was pretty much on a wing and a prayer of, I did certainly have several women lined up to interview and talk about their work. But I also was hoping, much like when I was researching in Africa, that those women would then introduce me to other women. Coming back to what the ladies have been talking about on the panel, what I didn't expect, I went there to help animals because I love wildlife so much, and we're in the 6th greatest extinction right now. We've lost over 68% of our wildlife in the last 50 years. So I was focusing on that, but you know, learning on the ground that that's all good and well. But if you aren't supporting the communities around those wildlife who are depending on them or who are impacted by them, then the animals are going to go away. It doesn't matter how much love you have or how much money you throw at the problem. You really do have to work with the communities and empower those communities to take care of their wildlife, which was a really big takeaway for me from both the film and Over and Above Africa. It's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Wow. So I watched your TED Talk after I learned that you were going to be on this panel, and I really recommend to everybody in this listening audience to, in addition to watching Breaking Their Silence, also watch the TED Talk that talks about this moment that Kerry just kind of passed over here. Well, I got inspired at this thing. No, you inspired everybody in that TED Talk. We all want to get on an airplane right now.
Yes, do it.
Yeah, and so this concept of your own accountability, realizing that there is this problem, and if I really truly love wildlife, I need to do something about it. And so after our panel ends today, can you tell us what you'd like our audience to consider? And actually, before you answer that, I want to make this note to the audience too, in the interest of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Kerry David is here today representing all of these voices of these women who are out in the field. And we thank you so much for being able to be here to be your voice and be their voices.
I wish they could have been here, like timelines, and they're out in the field doing really important work. And sometimes these kinds of things, they just can't show up for it. But, you know, there are so many women of color in my film, and I'm so proud to be able to say that we have become this one big family. And to your point, Sarah, I would, you know, that door that says this door leads to death and this door leads to public speaking. I would skip through the door that led to death. Always. I'm like, yep, I'll take death. Thank you. I so related to that story. And it was a beautiful moment. Sorry, I'm a little off topic, but I'll share it a little. My friend, Ashley McCavey, she was one of the pivotal women that just passed the Vermont for Wildlife bill, which now Vermont is an ivory sale-free state. And her work was an 8-year epic journey. And I got asked to do this TEDx talk, which is such a joke because everyone who knows me even a little bit knows it's the thing I am most terrified of. And I was about to go on. It was the day before. And I just said to her, I can't do it. I'm going to bail. I just can't do it. I can't do it. And she sent me this email. And it was much to your point, Sarah. She said, you're not going on there to be seen or to be heard for what you have to say. You're going on there because you are representing all of the souls who have passed, died, been murdered. And you are speaking for them. So you have this army of souls behind you, and that includes rangers, men and women, rangers, and the wildlife that's been murdered. And suddenly, when you get out of your own way, and it isn't about you, and who cares if you trip up or fall over, or you have a booger hanging out your nose? Who cares? So I say that by way of a little bit of apology, because it's not the best TED talk in the world, but it is definitely authentic. And now, of course, I've forgotten your question. Sorry, Amaroq. Can you ask me again?
Sure. After our audience is through listening to our whole panel today, what would you like them to consider?
I would love, obviously, it's a Saturday and you're showing up here and you're spending your time learning about the situation with our wildlife. And that is so highly commendable. But it doesn't really mean anything if you don't physically act and do something. And when I say that, I think people have this idea you have to quit your job and just like go all in for a company or a nonprofit. And that the truth couldn't be further away from that. Everyone has their own skill set. So for me, I'm a filmmaker, so it made sense to me that I would gather my resources and go and make a film about this while I learned about this poaching crisis. But, if you're a graphic designer, I can't think of one nonprofit that doesn't need help in their graphic design for their website. It's not just that you have to be on the ground helping wildlife. Everything that you have as a person that makes you unique is going to help a nonprofit. So I would just say, call up a nonprofit and ask what you can do to help them, because you helping them frees up their time to really do the important work on the ground or to support that work on the ground. So that would be, I hope that you would take that away from today.
I think we all will. I'm going to ask you one more question. What was your single most insight that you came away with after filming Breaking Their Silence?
I kind of touched on it earlier, but my takeaway was that when I went there to find out about how I could help prevent more extinctions, I was so focused heavily on the wildlife itself and just the animals that I didn't factor in that you have to help people. You have to empower the people that are impacted by the wildlife, that are affected negatively by the wildlife. And, some of these people that I met, especially the children, had never seen a rhino, an elephant, or a lion in the wild because they're on the game reserves, which is for rich white people to come and pay for. So part of the work that we're doing with Over and Above Africa is we now fund school trips, educational trips for children to go game reserves and see them for themselves and take an interest in it. So my takeaway was, you can't divide wildlife from communities and people. It's all of us working together, and that's men and women. But I think we need to have women in higher positions in these companies, because that, I think, will be the result that we all need for all of our work.
Your films bring forward so many things that I know I didn't know about before, like just this idea that not realizing that children in Africa don't get to see wildlife because it's not where they live. They're on game reserves for rich white people. The woman who divorced her husband, the first woman in her tribe to divorce her husband. What a historic moment that was, and what violence resulted from it. I mean, there are so many truths that you present in your work. It's very, very powerful, and I'm so glad that you went to that event in LA that one day. took the door that you took.
It changed my life. Yeah, I'm so glad I did too. But and look, I get to meet fantastic women like you all and what you're all doing, and it's so inspiring. And the women who didn't know each other in my film, when they saw the film and saw that other women were doing that work, it inspired them to continue. So that resilience, it's definitely it's a very powerful feeling.
It is. Thank you so much. We're going to move on now, but we'll get to answer more questions in the question and answer. Thank you, Kerry. And so now, Talasi Brooks, you're next. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your organization.
Hi, I'm Talasi Brooks. I'm a staff attorney with Western Watersheds Project in Boise, Idaho. And Western Watersheds Project is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to protect and restore Western public lands and wildlife through education, public policy initiatives, and legal advocacy. And so the legal advocacy part of it is where I come in.
So some people think that legal work is like really dry and tedious. And I think you probably have a different view of that on that. And I know I certainly do, but why don't you tell us what keeps you engaged in this work?
Well, so legal work can be really dry and tedious. But the thing is that it is necessary sometimes to secure good outcomes. And in the case of wolves in Idaho, they really need a strong voice, and things will not get better for them, I don't think, without legal advocacy. And so I think that what keeps me going in this work and when I talk about this work, I'm talking about, wolves in Idaho specifically, is just how unfairly the way that they're treated and managed is. And so I can give some examples. So essentially, over the last several years in Idaho, the policies for wolf hunting and trapping have been significantly liberalized. It's the only liberal thing about Idaho is wolf hunting and trapping. And right now, a single individual can kill through hunting or trapping up to 30 wolves in Idaho. In most of the state, the wolf hunting and trapping season is 11 to 12 months long. So wolves only get a rest maybe for 1 month in July. And the Idaho Department of Fish and Game is actually funding a nonprofit organization that is misleadingly named the Foundation for Wildlife Management that pays glorified bounties to wolf trappers of up to $1,000 per wolf to reimburse them for trapping wolves in certain parts of the state. And Idaho Fish and Game gave that organization over $20,000 in funds this year. And so this has happened in a progressive sort of way since I started paying attention to wolves in Idaho. I got involved with this work through, I brought a lawsuit when I was working with a different organization to try to rein in Wildlife Services, which is a federal agency that responds to livestock conflicts with wolves and coyotes, mostly by lethal means in Idaho. And so we sued them, and I sort of started getting involved with wolf issues that way. And over the course, and I started tracking the wolf issues because I found out it was pretty hard to find public information about wolf management, really what was going on with them. After 2015, Idaho Fish and Game wasn't even doing population counts, so they didn't really know how many there were, and yet they had these really liberal hunting and trapping policies. And so just kind of wanting to get that information for myself and also get it out there to the public has been a real strong motivating force for me. And over time, I just keep seeing things get worse. And I am very strongly, I would really like to see things get better.
So I have a theory. People ask me, how do we change things in Idaho? And I say, we need to get everybody from California to move to Idaho and become a whole new population of the state. And I say that jokingly, but not really. Can you talk a little bit about what you think it would take to change the dynamics in Idaho? Because I think we all in the wolf world look at Idaho as the poster child of like everything you wouldn't want to have happen to wolves.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I think that there is a lot of good work that's happening. There's a group called the Wood River Wolf Project that is serving as a model of how non-lethal tools can be successful. But I think that the politics in Idaho right now are really hostile in this state. The Idaho legislature is hostile to wolves. The Idaho Fish and Game Commission is incredibly hostile to wolves. And I think that a first step, I mean, we have assembled sort of a group of grassroots activists that are, and individuals that are kind of trying to think through these issues and think what we can do to make things better as we speak right now. But one of the things that I think would be a benefit would be to at least have a wildlife conservation representation on the Idaho Fish and Game Commission, because the Fish and Game Commission thinks they work only for hunters and trappers, and there's no representation for wildlife conservation interests on the Idaho Fish and Game Commission at all. And I don't think a single one of those commissioners would say that they're a wolf advocate. So that would be at least a first step. I think we also need media outreach efforts. We need the public to be better informed. I think there is a large section of the public still in Idaho that would be horrified to know what's happening with wolves. Like, we got information earlier this year through a public records request that showed people killing wolves, shooting wolves that were 16 to 18 pound baby wolves. Like, there is nothing fair, chase, or, ethical about that. And so we need to get that information out there and get people engaged, and we need people to show up.
So just kind of following through with that then, in Idaho, given those are the circumstances currently, how can people there help promote wolf conservation? Like, if you had a wish list for your group, for your work, who would you want to have calling you, and what would you want to have them offering you? I can do this, I can do that. I know someone who wants to be on the commission. What would you like?
Well, I mean, there's so many things. So I think that one thing we need, we do need people who want to do things like serve on the commission, or people who want to write letters to the editor about wolves and why wolves matter, people who want to write opinion pieces and get them published, journalists who want to really dig into the issues. All of those people are part of our team that we need. We need people who want to educate folks about wolves and dispel the myth that these are invasive Canadian gray wolves that are, marauding through Idaho, terrorizing the countryside. We need all those things. But I think the biggest thing that we need is people to show up. And when I say show up, I mean people, the public, to go to the Fish and Game Commission meetings and speak out in favor of wolves, and people to show up at the Idaho Wolf Control Board meetings and just be a face of a citizen who cares about wildlife. I think that, here, as with other places, I think we have a lot of activist fatigue around wolves. I don't know if other folks have the experience of struggling with that in their communities. But we need people to stay engaged and to become engaged and to rally around wolves to make things better for them. And I'm stopping talking just as you stepped away.
Sorry, I had a Siberian Husky who was about to make a lot of noise if I didn't let him out. No guarantee he won't still make noise now that I've let him out. So, yeah, so people that are listening, again, these are opportunities that no matter what your background is, the fact that you care about wolves and want these practices to stop, what Talasi is telling you is there is a place for you here. Just showing up and being a presence for wolves. Even if you don't feel confident speaking, but if you do, great. And just out of curiosity, Talasi, what was your background before you went to law school? I'm wanting to pull in all these threads of what everybody brought to the table with them before their professional career.
Well, so I grew up in Connecticut, and my family went on camping trips to the West when I was growing up. And I had determined, by probably like the age of 10, that I was going to go west and live in the West near the mountains if it was at all possible, which it turned out to be. But so eventually I started working on trail crews for nonprofit organizations and for the Forest Service. And I became a Forest Service wilderness ranger, where I worked in California in the John Muir and Ansel Adams Wilderness. And then I also worked in the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness in Idaho. And so another thing that kind of brought me to this work, I mean, I got involved with the environmental work because of my love for wilderness, but I heard and saw wolves in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness. I howled with wolves, and that's a powerful experience that certainly keeps you engaged with advocacy. I hope that my daughter will also see and howl with wolves in the Idaho wilderness someday, and I hope that they'll still be there.
I think because of your work, they will be, and we all thank you for your work. So we're going to move on now. Thank you so much, Talasi, and nice to finally see you. I don't know how many times we've been on conference calls before. I don't think I've ever seen you. Hi. So Quinn Reed, please, it's your turn. Would you introduce yourself and your organization?
Yes, indeed. My name is Quinn Reed, and I have the great fortune of working with Amaroq at the Center for Biological Diversity. I am the Oregon Policy Director, and in that role, I work on a wide variety of wildlife issues, as well as environmental justice, which is really exciting. And I have to confess that last night, and even early this morning, I didn't know how I was going to rally for this, because all day yesterday, I was in an Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting that was so flipping demoralizing. But hearing, all of you today, seeing your faces, hearing your stories, I can feel myself being filled back up. And it's just a reminder, how important that community is. So thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I read yes, you're one of those people that I dashed off an email to at 1 a.m. What? They denied the petition to stop beaver trapping on public lands? What happened? Yeah, you must have had quite a day.
Yeah.
So, Quinn, I want to talk to you about something that we haven't touched on a whole lot yet, and that is the role of mentorship. What role does mentorship play, particularly for women, in the wildlife conservation field, and who were your mentors?
Yeah, I cannot overstate the importance of mentorship and what it's meant for me in my life. I'm not one of those people who knew early on that wildlife conservation was my path. I grew up poor in the suburbs, a single mom. I didn't have any experiences in the wilderness. To the extent I knew anything about wildlife, it was from going to the zoo on field trips. That was really it. And yet I picked things up over the years, from school, things I saw on TV, and, I had this idea that, there's this problem out there and I want to help. And if I may, it's sort of appropriate. When I was 13, I wrote a list of life goals. It's pretty brief. And it turns out I wrote it almost exactly 27 years ago, on November 10th, 1993. So if I can, I would like to read them to you. And please, I was 13, so be merciful. Number one, goal, it says stated goals in life. Number one, to make a dramatic impact on the outcome of the environment. 2, get a job working to help the environment where I won't sit in an office behind a desk all day. All right. 3, to graduate from high school with honors. 4, to get into a good college. All right. 5, to fall madly in love with a tall, buff, sexy guy, in and subsequently out. That's great. Okay. 6, to visit the tropical rainforest. Yes, done. And then 7 is to be famous. So I'm still working on that one. But, those first 2 goals, there was something, I was 13 and I knew myself well enough then. There was some desire there, but it was so raw and unformed. And, when I was 16, when I finally got my driver's license, I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to go find some places. I'm going to volunteer and figure out what I can do. And so I started making phone calls and leaving messages and not getting any responses. So it was kind of frustrating. And one day I did get a response, and it was from Thelma Gilmer at the Tahoma Audubon Society. And she was like, well, what do you want to do? Sure, why don't you come to office? Let's talk. And, you know, so I drove over to the office, and she at that time was one of the volunteer members of the Conservation Committee. And she started me off, you know, stuffing envelopes, and then I started asking her questions. And within months, I was tagging along with her everywhere. You know, I was writing articles for the newsletter. I was going out to reserves with her and helping her clear trails. I was, you know, talking to the media. I was 16 years old, and it wasn't just Thelma. There were, you know, two other really remarkable women on that conservation committee, Roxy and Helen. And to this day, I look back, I didn't appreciate it then. I didn't understand just their quiet, dogged determination. And, you know, given how unformed I was, I think without that influence, I don't know that wildlife would have been my path, right? I mean, and certainly my path kind of veered all around, but when it came back to my heart is in conservation, 13-year-old me knew better than 23-year-old me what I should be doing. You know, it was those experiences, and I have so much gratitude to those women. And I don't think they have any clue what that meant to me, just that they let me hey buddy, so that's my toddler. You know, that they gave me the chance to be a part of their world and show me what was possible. And I think today, what mentorship means for me is what so many of you have said. It's community, right? It's groups like this. It's the incredible people, the women that we surround ourselves with, and people who fill us up and inspire us. You know, I think what's really on my mind now is, well, how do I pay that forward? Right now that I'm in a position to, you know, maybe that's be presumptuous, but, you know, to give an opportunity to someone else, I volunteer once a week with a program called the Refugee and Immigrant Student Empowerment Program. And it's just tutoring with homework. But these students have come from the most unbelievable backgrounds. I mean, they have suffered in ways that I cannot comprehend, and yet are so resilient. And, you know, I was helping some young women with their biology homework, and they asked me what I did. And I said, I'm an attorney. And they said, you're a lawyer. Wow, okay. I said, yeah, you know, I help animals. And they said, you can do that? And I'm trying to think about ways, how do I look around in my own like world and network, and, you know, can I invite them to come along to some of the work that we do, you know? So these are the opportunities I'm thinking about and hoping that we all can do. I mean, I'm sure we have neighbor kids, friends of our children who are really show that little like spark of interest in wildlife, and how do we like nurture that? So yeah, that's what's on my mind. And also just feeling a lot of gratitude for how I experienced mentorship.
So, you know, Quinn, this is all being recorded, and I think that when we get the recording back, you should send this recording to those women who were your mentors. They might already be watching right now, though. You never know. You might already be famous. That was beautiful. Really, really beautiful to talk about bringing that forward. And I'm wondering if you can dive in a little bit more. This will be your last question, I guess, for the moment. What expectations or preconceptions do you think you face as a woman and as an Asian woman in the conservation field?
It's a tough one, but I think, you know, I alluded to this hearing yesterday, and I think it is illustrative of some things that I experienced as a woman, as an Asian woman. So this is a hearing on a petition that we helped craft to ban beaver trapping on federally managed public lands in Oregon. And, you know, we knew it was a highly contentious issue. And, you know, when we went in there, there were 56 people signed up to testify. And of those 56 people, there were, including me, only 2 people of color. The other person was a woman that I hired in a previous role. So, you know, just that day-to-day experience of feeling otherized and knowing that, you know, you look different from what that community has come to expect as the norm. But as I sat there and watching, and part of the reason my blood was boiling, you know, as I was watching just rampant misinformation being spread and accepted by the commission, who clearly had an agenda to preserve this legacy of trapping. And I was getting, I mean, I could feel the rage, you know, that knot you get in your chest. And I had my testimony up in front of me, and I kept crossing stuff out, and I was like, I'm gonna just rip into them. And then I went, no, you don't get to do that. And so I gave my, you know, my professional testimony and did what I could, and then went, okay. Well, right after me, and this is all virtual, so I see this guy pop up, and, you know, he's old white guy wearing bright hunter orange, and in the background, he's got like a big pelt hanging on his wall and a couple of big mounted fish. And I thought, well, shit, I know what's coming. I did not know what was coming because this guy turned out to be a huge beaver advocate. He was a fisherman who really understood the connection between beaver's beaver-created habitat and the fish that he wanted to fish. And he railed. He accused the agency of lying. He said, he accused them of, he's like, your inaction will come back to haunt you. I mean, it was unbelievable. So I'm on this text string with, you know, my colleagues. We're saying, who's this Chuck guy? He's our new hero. And I sort of jokingly said, oh, what would it be like to be that free? And then I just felt this sort of this like crushing sense of, I will never know because I don't get to behave that way. Not just because I'm a representative of an NGO, but because I'm a woman and an Asian woman. I have to be calm and collected. You know, I have to be rational, but not bossy. I need to be authoritative, but not cold. I need to be invested, but not reactive. It is this constant balancing act, and it takes so much energy and so much, and you do that, right? Because it's like, if I let it go, if I don't do that work, do I lose my seat at the table, right? How do I continue on? And I think that's something I'm currently wrestling with. The other thing that happened during that hearing was during lunch, someone, one of the trappers from a predominant organization in Oregon gave me a call. And on one hand, I thought, you know, I appreciate that someone from the opposition can give me a call to talk things through. But when he signed off, he called me girl. I'm a 40-year-old woman. I'm a lawyer. Like, I'm a professional. And so right there, there's two things. And I think so much came up for me in that moment that encapsulates patterns I've seen over and over again. But what I'm thinking about, what's on my mind, and what brings me some hope is I'm like, am I served by doing all that work? Are we as women served by putting all of this energy to conform and contort ourselves to these norms? You know, what do we get by having a seat at the table? You know, is that getting us what we want? Is that helping us? Is that helping wildlife? Are we better advocates that way? Are we better advocates when we're bringing more of our essential selves to the table? So these are some of the kinds of questions that are percolating for me right now. But in the background is always these expectations that I saw yesterday.
That was so much cool. That really, just to think about how that is what you deal with every time you go up to testify, and just knowing how exhausted we already are by the time we get to that lectern because of being up till 2 o'clock in the morning for the week before preparing for that, going up with that level of exhaustion, and then having to do what the machinations of what you just described is, that's got to change.
Yeah,
that's got to change. That is something else we all have to see change, make change. And thank you for enlightening everyone on that. Okay, I'm going to let you go. And now it's my turn. So I guess I need to set the timer for myself too. So my name is Amaroq Weiss. I've been working in wolf advocacy for 23 years, and for the last 8 years of that time, I've been working for the Center for Biological Diversity. Before that, I worked for the California Wolf Center, the Mexican Wolf Conservation Fund, and Defenders of Wildlife. And just to briefly describe my organization, the Center for Biological Diversity, it's based in Tucson, Arizona. We were founded some 32, 33 years ago in order to get the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to finally work on recovering the Mexican gray wolf and to get protections in place for the Mexican spotted owl. And I would say that most of us at the center are scientists or lawyers or both. We also have amazing people on staff with communications, social media skills, GIS mapping skills that are indispensable to our work. And despite all the serious nature of all of those titles of our jobs, really fun people, really fun people to hang out with. We are bereft that we haven't been able to have our full staff retreat this year because of COVID, because we so love being with each other. We have a common goal to save biodiversity for its own intrinsic value, but also because biodiversity is tied intimately to human welfare and well-being, and we have a very strong commitment to social addressing issues of social inequity as it goes around with environmental issues. So I decided to use my time, since nobody here is asking me questions, just to offer some key lessons that I have learned from my work. So the first lesson is find your home. In all work, whether you are a singer, a stockbroker, a wildlife advocate, the environment and the people that you work with makes all the difference in the world. Knowing who you are, knowing what your values are, where you fit is so, so important, because each of these organizations have different goals, different principles. You know, some are warriors going to battle, others strive for the art of compromise. And you need to know who you are. You need to know where you fit into that spectrum and know where you stand. It's going to make a difference in your effectiveness, but it's also going to make a difference in your own personal happiness. So if it's the wrong fit, move on. Ultimately, it's what you want your voice to be. Second, wherever you work, rely on yourself. Have your group of colleagues, but also rely on yourself, because it is your reputation, it is your integrity, it is your sense of honor, and living that is going to create a solid foundation for you, for everything you do, for how you feel about yourself, for how others treat you. And I only had to learn that lesson once. It was 20 years ago. I was going to be testifying at a commission in the state I lived in at the time, and it was on trap check requirements. And I wanted to be able to tell the commission what was the trap check requirement in a neighboring state. I wanted to be able to offer that comparison in my testimony. So, and it was only at the last minute that I realized I needed this information. So I called up a colleague in the other state and I asked them if they could please talk to the USDA Wildlife Services agent in that state, who my colleague spoke with regularly, and posed this question. And what happened was that either my colleague misunderstood my question, or when she asked the USDA Wildlife Services agent the question, she stated it incorrectly, or he heard it incorrectly. And what happened was, as a result, I was given incorrect information, and I testified at the hearing completely unaware that what I was saying was inaccurate. So about 6 months to a year later, I did a Public Records Act request with the state on this whole trap check issue. And in the records I received, I found a letter from the USDA Wildlife Services head of the neighboring state, writing to the commission, telling them that I had lied in my testimony. So in everything you do, you are putting yourself out to the world, and I want you to feel good about what you're doing. And I feel so good right now seeing Malcolm. I love that kid. Hi, Malcolm. I don't know how you get any work done with him around. So next lesson, now that you've identified your values and your principles, the next thing you need to know is this, that in trying to find common ground with your counterparts, that doesn't mean you have to give up your values and your principles. It's a really complex world. And one of the things that's really exciting about this field is that you're constantly engaged, you're constantly learning, and you're constantly questioning your own values and your own principles. And some people think that being intransigent and compromising is the best activism. Some people think that finding the ultimate compromise is the best activism. But I find that in every single case, I have to ask myself, is this my ego talking? Or is this what I'm staying firm on is really, really going to help the cause? Always that conversation is going on internally. And so in every field, and it doesn't matter if you're in wildlife advocacy, if you're in arts, if you're in politics, too many times people let their egos take over and blind them to what is right in front of them. So ultimately, understand your values and do not lose them. Be a simple, straightforward, direct human being, and you're not going to lose your values. So my last point has to do with the people in this field of wildlife activism. One of the lucky things, in case you haven't already gotten this so far today, is that we are in a field that is populated by dozens, by hundreds, by thousands of activists who are the most wise, bright, compassionate, funny, and creative minds available. And so really, of all the fields to choose from, this is one of the best because of who surrounds us. And hearing those voices, it doesn't just inspire us, it enriches us. It enriches me. I'm hearing from these women that enriches every single one of them. And so there's so many people to learn from, as I have learned, that have brought me to where I am and from whom I continue to learn. And so it's just as important for you to share your thoughts with others so others can learn from you. You have natural mentorship qualities in you just by virtue of the field that you're in. It draws it out, and it's how we all got here, and it's how other people will get brought into this field. And so with that, Betsy, I think we are ready to do audience question and answer.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh, you guys, what an amazing panel. Naturally, the comments are far outweighing the questions in terms of accolades and how much you've inspired and the stories that you shared. And so that's really incredible. Before we dive into the comments, I'm reminded that at the beginning of this week, I had mentioned that a good friend of ours, Sandy would know as well, Kate Scott, Lain, you know too, here in Arizona, actually interviewed for a position on the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. And believe it or not, they put her name forward to the governor with two others. Now, I believe there's only going to be one appointee this time around, Sandy, correct? So she and two other men are up for the position. And what's different about Kate is she's a non-consumptive user. She's a conservationist. She is a non-hunter. So it'll be interesting to see how this progresses. And I know, Sandy, you're working on a sign-on letter, correct? I don't want to speak for you, but a sign-on letter where we're going to let the governor know that it's time for those people to be represented by Kate on this commission. So just thought it was very appropriate to bring that up.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Yep, I'm working on the letter right after this. So.
One of the, some of the questions really do focus on Idaho. This is Wolf Week, so obviously wolves are a hot topic. And one of the questions which I had as well does the majority of people in Idaho support wolves? Kind of like, nationally we know people support wolves, but they still delisted them. Are you seeing that same thing in Talasi and Idaho, where the majority of people support them, but Game and Fish has just decided it doesn't matter?
Well, I would say I don't know. I mean, I think there have been some studies done around wolves that are probably a little older now, and we've thought about doing a new public opinion study about wolves in Idaho, but frankly, we're a little afraid of what we might find out. And also, our grassroots coalition doesn't really have any funding. We're not our own nonprofit, and all of our groups kind of deal with the wolf issue a little bit separately. If you want to look at the politics of Idaho as a barometer for public opinion towards wolves, probably the majority of Idahoans do not support wolves. In all of our elections, it's about 65% Republican versus 35% Democrat, pretty much across the board. So if all of those Republicans were anti-wolf, and all the Democrats were pro-wolf, that would give you a sense. My sense living here is that it's not very positive, especially in rural communities, for wolves.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I have one specific for Karin from Deborah Taylor. Karin, she wanted to know if you would support CPW commissioners not being required to be hunters.
Yes, I don't think there should be a requirement in any of these situations to be hunters or non-hunters even. It is important that it's balanced and that their voices represent the voices of the entire community. And of course, Colorado, as we know, has very strong opinions about their wildlife that they treasure, as far as, beyond the hunting, beyond livestock production, and preserving them for their intrinsic value, which is why Prop 114 passed.
Right. Great, thank you. Quinn, from Susan Libby, how do I help go back at the beaver issue in Oregon? She's in Eugene. How can she help with the beaver issue?
Oh, stay tuned. We're not done. This was but a minor setback. So we've got some plans of brewing. So you can find my contact information on the website. But certainly, the center and our incredible partners, which include many amazing scientists and economists, we're looking at legislative approaches, judicial approaches. So there's a lot going on. But in the short term, gosh, writing a letter to the editor of your local paper to say, this seems really odd. What's going on here? And expressing your dismay at what happened. That's one really, really important way people can make their voices heard. And decision makers pay attention to this.
I'm not sure, because I know every state is different, so I just have a question, because here in Arizona, we went, city by city, county by county, trying to get resolutions passed by those places against killing contests. Is that a tactic that could work? And I guess I'm asking everyone here, is this a tactic that could work in Oregon or in Montana, Idaho? I don't know. I know everything. I know structures are different, so I'm just asking if that's a possible option for beavers.
I think it certainly could be, and certainly the path that we've seen for other issues can be, administrative to legislative to the ballot. So there are many different paths it could take. I mean, in Oregon, we're the beaver state, and there's a lot of public support for this really interesting critter.
Okay, great. The power of people's voice, it's amazing, which you guys have all talked about. Casey, please tell us some, about your experience with the white bison calf. That was pretty fascinating that you published on Facebook. You're on mute. You're on mute, Casey. Maybe turn up your volume. You're on mute. There you are. Okay.
I think I got it. Okay. Well, so in the legislature, I met some Native Americans, actually of the Blackfeet tribe, that were advocating for the wolf and for the grizzly. One of the bills was to close the trapping outside and the killing, the hunting and the trapping of wolves right outside the Yellowstone border. And our paths continued to cross. Well, up in the Bitterroot of Montana and Lolo, not long ago, this year, a white buffalo calf was born, which, first of all, is very rare, and the buffalo is very symbolic to the Native Americans. And one of the elders invited me to come to their naming ceremony for this white buffalo. What was especially very cool about it was not only is a white buffalo sacred to the Native Americans, but this one was a female. And the elders told me that it's the first white female buffalo in 900 years. So different tribes came and gathered, and I got to be a part of the naming ceremony. And it was just so moving and so inspirational. Her name in English is Creator's White Maiden Buffalo. And what she is a sign of is women. That women, she's a sign of change, and she's a sign that it will be women that will make this change. That we will be the leaders in what is to come. And it gave me chills. It made me cry. I thought of my ancestors. I thought of my grandmother who couldn't even vote. I thought of recently, now we have a vice president, a female. It inspires me to this day, and it does. It gives me a lot of hope. The elders said in 30 months, we will see a lot of this come to fruition. I don't know where the 30 months fits in, but I'll be watching. And I hope she inspires others too. And you keep that in your heart, that hope.
That's really beautiful, Casey. What a gift to be able to be a part of that.
Yes.
Yeah, it really speaks volumes about you as well.
Thank you.
We have a question regarding letters to the editor, because we did mention that. They would like to know, do they really have an impact? It seems folks don't read newspapers much anymore. Would another channel be more effective in which to write? Anyone?
May I respond?
Absolutely.
So our communications experts who have been in the field for 30 years tell us that letters to the editor are the very first thing that most people who are newspaper readers read. And whether they've transitioned to reading online or that paper in their hands, it's still one of the first places they go. And I can't disagree. It's one of the first places I go. I want to see what the local community is thinking about an issue that I think is important, and maybe they don't. Maybe no letters show up. But when I see those letters, that tells me, it also lets me know who I might want to contact in that community. Because if they're writing a letter supportive for wolves, then I know they're there, and I can look them up, and I can contact them and say, hey, great letter. That I'm so thrilled you did that. Are there other people in your community that feel that way? Would you like me to come talk to you or whatever? So I think they are, and that's not just for me. So other people in their community are reading those things. And when they see that their neighbors, this is another kind of a piece of social psychology, I guess. A lot of times what we're saying can fall on deaf ears, depending on who that audience is. We don't reach every audience, but people who read a letter coming from someone they know the name, maybe they shop the same store from their own community, they put more weight on that. So it really is an important avenue.
I would just add one more thing to that, and I totally agree with you. And that is, we early on during COVID started doing letters to the editor workshops because it was one of the things you could do through Zoom. And a number of people wrote their first ever letters to the editor and actually got them published. And it inspired them as well. So not only inspiring the other people who knew them, but inspired them to like, oh, I want to do more. I want to keep doing this. So I think that's another benefit.
Great. Thank you, Sandy. And in the spirit of doing more, here's another question from Deborah Lay. She is with another wildlife NGO, and they got an email to send comments on the proposals for the new administration's key positions, including EPA, Interior, et cetera. What are your thoughts on this? Do any of the candidates stand out either in good or bad way? How can we help guide this? That's a lot. Who would like to start? Lain? Lain might have some insights on this.
I was thinking Lain or Talasi might, yeah.
I think I can weigh in a little bit on that. I think there is a lot there, but yeah, I think there are some opportunities right now with this new administration coming in. We know there are going to be a lot more appointments. We are specifically asking the Biden transition team to appoint an animal czar. We think there should be someone that is a key advisor to this administration on all things animal related. So I think that is one area. And we know that the appointments to Department of Agriculture, Department of Interior, there are some key parts of the federal legislature and the federal administration that if we get the right appointees in, they can be influenced on some of these bigger issues. We know there are a lot of changes that we would want to see within the Department of Agriculture in terms of their rules and some laws and, of course, enforcement. So I think there are real opportunities now that we have identified this new administration, and we are putting together a comprehensive list of all of our top priorities to press with the new administration coming in. And I'm sure we'll be publishing that. So anybody who wants to follow Animal Wellness Action, you'll be seeing that in our social media and in our blogs and on our website coming up soon. I can't remember what the rest of that question was, Betsy.
Well,
so
that's okay. There's a follow-up to what you're saying. How do we contact the new administration? Which is a great question, right? Because they're not yet in position. So how do they let their voice be known to the new administration?
The transition teams are public for each of the agencies, the Department of Interior and Environmental Protection Agency. There are transition teams in place, and you can look at the names there and then go through. I think any of the environmental groups can help you get contact information, or what we're doing in Sierra Club is providing information on key issues to folks who are either on transition teams or connected with people on transition teams. But I would just take a look at that, and I can share that link or send it to you, Betsy, if that would be helpful.
Absolutely. In fact, we can make sure we post it on this feed, because this feed will still be available to view through next Tuesday. And then we'll be moving it to a YouTube channel where anyone can watch at any time. And we can do posts on it as well to help get the word out to the transition teams. Absolutely. So we have just I think, about 12 minutes left. And I don't know if we just want to do some parting comments from each of you. There's so many comments about how inspired they all are today. And so I think it would be great just to finish up with some wonderful words from each of you. You've all done amazing work, and really, really admire what you're doing. And on a personal note, so glad to see this panel happen, because it was something I really wanted to happen. So glad it came together. So I don't know if we just want to, I'm going to start at the top of my screen and go around, and, any just last parting comments, starting with you, Casey.
Well, one of my thoughts in listening to all of you women, I would love, I wish we were all in Sedona. I would love to hang out with all of you. You're incredible and fun. Like Amaroq said, we have to have a sense of humor in what we do. It's very hard and painful, sometimes gut-wrenching. For every step forward, feels like there's 5 back. But I do think, I encourage our viewers, our supporters, people that are just curious, do something. Others mentioned this, everybody has something to give. And it's kind of like a New Year's resolution, or in dieting, it's like, what's one more thing I could do? And I would say make it effective. What that is that you do. Call your legislature. Let them know how you feel about wildlife. In my case, I definitely want to see trapping become a much bigger issue. So they know, because opposing trapping is bipartisan. But the legislators don't seem to know that. And so it's the people that need to tell them. And lastly, one thing that keeps me going, sometimes when I feel very ineffective and like a hamster on a wheel, I remind myself, as bad as it gets, how much worse it would be if we didn't keep trying. So keep on trying and celebrate those victories, those wins. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Karin, you're next up on my screen.
Did you say Kerry? I think you did, yeah. When I was in Vietnam, I had the great fortune to interview Hong Quan, and she was quoting a friend of hers, but she said something that stuck with me, which is the biggest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will change it. And if we all thought that, then we're doomed. But if we take this panel and what every woman has said today, and we act, doesn't matter how small, one act, we will change the way things are right now for the positive. So that would be what I'd like to leave everybody with.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kerry. And Karin.
Hello. Wow. I'm just, again, humbled to be amongst this group and just amazed. We talk about, we're getting together and how we inspire each other and want to inspire others, but I found myself rapidly taking notes, from what I heard from you and Amaroq, what you said, your 3 points, that advice is advice I need. And I just really appreciate that. And, I think Quinn of those mentors, right? For me, Patrick Valentino, Cal Center, I wouldn't have done any of this if he didn't have faith in somebody who had no background in this, as a volunteer, And so, anyone who wants to do this has that power. And like some of you touched on, you don't have to have this background. You just have to have the passion. And it's the passion I see in this group, and the passion that I'm getting emotional, sorry. And the passion that we share. And I know it works. I talked about that danger within, but I've also seen how it does work. When we come together, when we take that time, when we focus on these efforts. And I agree with you, Amaroq, because you don't necessarily have to compromise who you are. There are ways to meet everybody's, values and still be who you are. I mean, I'm a wolf advocate, but I spend most of my time in the ranching community, and I don't hide that I'm, the wolf lady is what they keep calling me. It's almost like girl, right? But I just want to thank all of you, because it's more than just hope. It is a fact that we can make a difference. We do make an impact. And I just think of everything that all of you have done, and it's just beyond incredible. So thank you.
Thank you, Karin. Sandy.
Well, I really enjoyed this, and getting to hear people's stories and getting to know you all a bit. So impressed with all the work, and look forward to following what you all are doing, and knowing that I can put a face with that email that comes. Quinn, I think I've gotten a bunch of emails from you too, and now I know who you are. But I did want to reiterate something that was said earlier about, don't feel like you don't have something to contribute. There are so many things that you can do to help with this work. Early on, I wanted to help with a ballot measure, so I became a notary. So I'm still a notary, because you have to have petitions notarized in Arizona. And our original, actually the one that passed, the leg hold trap ban, I couldn't do tons on that, but I helped notarize petitions, and I gathered signatures. And so just really want to encourage folks to look at, getting involved and helping to make a difference. And it can be for 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 days or 5 years or much longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy, so much. Quinn and Malcolm?
Yes. Sorry about that. That was a lot of
No,
it's
it's
being
great.
part of the frame.
Not a problem. It's great.
I guess how I'm feeling, and what I would offer to the audience is just now feels like a really good time to hold our communities close, to take good care of each other, and to draw strength from one another. And at the same time, to look at whatever platforms we have, and we all have one, to create space for others. You never know what small act of grace might be life-changing for someone. So thank you so much for letting me be part of this. It was wonderful.
Yes, thank you. Talasi?
Well, it has been really interesting hearing from all of you, and there were so many things that I really related to strongly, like thinking about how can you effectively present yourself as an advocate and as a woman. And I find a lot of inspiration in the story of the white buffalo, and thinking about the special role that we as women have in creating a kinder and more ethical and better wildlife friendly world, I guess. And so I guess what I would leave everybody with is I hope that we can stay connected and continue to work together on these things. And if you want to reach out to me, please do. My email is tbrooks@westernwatersheds.org, and I'd love to hear from you.
Great, thank you. Lain?
Yeah, thank you, Betsy. I too, just hearing everybody's story, I'm not sure I can add anything new that people haven't already said, but I do think it's important for us to build and maintain our networks and get to know our legislators, get to know our commissions, and just show up. I know several of us have spoken to that, but it is critical. And it's one of those things, I think early on as an activist, I kept hearing that message, but somehow I dismissed it, that maybe it wouldn't be that important if I myself didn't show up, because who am I to show up? But it really is critical. We do have to have our own networks, have the power of our own voice, and be willing to do the work and be willing to be relentless. So we just absolutely have to commit ourselves to being the Donna Quixotes that we are, keep tilting at those windmills and keep making it happen.
Thank you, Lain. Thank you very much. And Amaroq, we can end with you. First, I would like to thank you and everyone on this panel on behalf of Sedona Wolf Week. It was absolutely amazing. The comments are still flying in on how inspirational this panel was. So Amaroq, why don't you take us home?
So I want to thank Lain for that last comment, because although some of my friends call me the Wolf Contessa, I think I now want to be called the Don Quixote, or what did you just say? It was amazing.
Donna Quixote.
Donna Quixote, that's amazing. Yep. So first, an enormous thanks to Betsy Klein for having the dream of having this panel, because this panel is a dream, and it is a dream come true for me to be able to have this discussion with all of these women wildlife warriors, some of whom I have known for decades, some of whom I've only recently just met and only met virtually. This wouldn't have happened if Betsy hadn't dreamed this up. So here's an example of dream what you want and make it happen. And so taking that further along, for those of you in your own local communities, why don't you take a look around, see who are the women leaders in your community, who are the women environmental voices, who are the women voices for domestic animals. Bring them together. form your own local panel. You may be the wolf expert on that panel if you feel comfortable doing that. But this is an example of creating community, and as Quinn noted, holding each other close and having this community is so important. And as Casey has given us all inspiration with the white buffalo and women are going to change the world, that really gave me chills. I guess I'd also like to echo the comment that I heard repeatedly, which is, we have our setbacks, things get uneven, we have our defeats, but we have our wins. And when we have them, they're really big. And the way I look at it is this: when we fight, we win. What we can't do is not fight. And I think you see that embodied in every single woman who has spoken here today. What we can't do is not fight. And so that's my mantra. That's my mantra every morning when I get up, and I pass that along to you. And again, just one more thanks to Betsy for having this dream and making it come true. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, ladies. And I'm going to say goodbye.